Good morning. Welcome to what is the first video on this new channel, Red Brew Review. I'm Julio. This is sort of my channel, shall we say. Uh, just a quick, before we get the video started, just a quick, brief introduction to what this channel will be. So there'll be a lot of content going out. I'll be speaking with other United fans from all across the world. If they'll say yes to what I send them. But yeah, so it's just going to be a lot of content based around Man United and what's going on currently, any news, any matches, anything that's going on really. And not just on myself, there'll be videos with myself as well, but also with other fans, like I said. So yeah, go on United. Now, as the first video, let's talk about Marcus Rashford. It's been an interesting week for Marcus Rashford. I would say, it all seems to have come ahead. A lot of things in the cycle happening, and then suddenly we're at the end of this cycle potentially where, reports come out, obviously, after he was dropped for the derby, United win the derby, and then obviously, this report coming out from Jamie Jackson saying that he's being marginalized and up for sale. So I think it's perfectly valid that we have a discussion about Marcus Rashford on the whole and everything that's led up to this, pretty much. So yeah, firstly, let's look at his career as a whole. I think for every United fan, there's whenever a player breaks through into the first team, we all remember. There'll be fans who remember when the class of '92 broke through and what that was like. There'll be United fans that remember when the likes of Johnny Evans, Danny Welbeck, Darren Gibson, these players broke through, and there'll be a lot of fans who remember what it was like when Marcus Rashford broke through. I remember, seeing the news that Martial dropped out injured and Marcus Rashford was going to start, and I don't think we could have expected anything better than a brace on his debut against Midtjylland in the Europa League, and then 3 days later scoring a brace against Arsenal in the Premier League. So as far as Wonder Kids go, I think that's pretty good for bursting onto the scene. Breaks into the first team in an injury hit Man United side under Louis van Gaal in February 2016, and from there it just seems to it only seems to be going upwards for Marcus Rashford. 3 months he's in the first team, 3-4 months he scores 8 goals in that time in the first team, and wins an FA Cup and finishes 5th, playing pretty much as the central striker. Then obviously in the summer, Louis van Gaal leaves and Jose Mourinho comes in. And initially there were murmurs of would Mourinho give opportunities to the younger players who'd broken through the previous year, because the narratives around Mourinho giving young players time and development. But having been an integral part of the first team towards the end of the previous season, there's no way he was going to be pushed back into the youth setup. And obviously, it's a little bit different for Marcus Rashford. He's not playing as many games this season, and he's not starting as many games. First full season in the first team, initially starts out of the first team, coming on for sub appearances. Zlatan's come in, Martial is starting on the left wing, Mkhitaryan's been brought in as well. And I think the big thing from this season was Marcus Rashford always found ways to break into the team. It was a lot of sub appearances at first, but then the more other players didn't produce the goods, the more Rashford found himself in the team and doing well. And then towards the end of that first season, wins the Europa League, wins the League Cup under Jose Mourinho as they finish 6th, scores 11 goals and gets 5 assists. And he finishes that season as the main number 9 almost, because of how injury hit United were in that forward line. And for a first full season, playing as a young squad player, either on the wing or as a striker, I think was a very good start, a very good full season for him. And then it just keeps going up and up for him. Whenever the expectations kept coming, he just kept meeting them. The next season he started the season and then he was out of the team for a bit. And then by the end of the season, he wasn't the first choice left winger. Mourinho often opted for Alexis Sanchez on the left wing with Lukaku up front and Lingard on the right. And Marcus Rashford gets 13 goals and 8 assists, which is statistically better than the previous season. And there seems to be this development. And then the year after is that season where Mourinho leaves halfway through and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer comes in, and people are starting to ask the question, can he keep maintaining this? Because Marcus Rashford's just been given the number 10 shirt, so the expectation obviously will have weighed on him a lot more. Goals wise, that season he matches it, and I think he got one less assist. But I think the big thing about that season was, in all the turmoil and in all the poor performances, Rashford was one of the very few consistent players that season, where Mourinho often opted for Anthony Martial and Alexis Sanchez. And again, Rashford found a way to replace both of those in the first team as the left winger. And it wasn't until Ole Gunnar Solskjaer comes in that, whether it be a 4-3-3 or his 4-1-2-1-2, diamond formation, it's only then where Rashford becomes consistent in the team, whether it be as a striker or a striker next to Lukaku or even as a left winger. It becomes very clear that Marcus Rashford is going to be a starter in this team. And obviously, once that season ends and the next one begins, 1920, a lot of questions are asked at the beginning of that season, where can he be the main number 9 because of all the players that left that summer, Sanchez, Lukaku, Mourinho favourites left. And it was a very strapped forward line in terms of numbers. So Rashford was going to be in the team regardless. It's whether he could produce the goods that what you're expecting of a kid with that kind of potential, shall we say. And, having already hit 3 double-digit seasons in a row, really it was can he go that step further? And, I think, because I remember Jose Mourinho was doing the punditry at the start of that season, and he made some excellent points. And one thing he said was, for me, Marcus Rashford can't be a 9. And back then, I think it was correct, because I just didn't see the way Rashford was built and the way he operated as a main number 9, as a fluid 9 forward, of course, but he needed that other figure on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, to interchange. But then, as a constant fixture in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's team in that full season, 22 goals and 9 assists. And bear in mind that this was that season where COVID stopped football in March. Mid-January till June, Marcus Rashford wasn't seen playing football. He had that back injury, which I feel like people don't realize how serious that is. He's playing through back injuries, and then he actually made it worse. A lot of athletes, when they get that back injury, they get surgery and they get like pins or nails or something put into their back. So to play through injury for United and score that many goals, I'm not saying he was playing with that back injury all season, but it was very clear for a while that he was playing through injury. And then we'll come to it later, obviously, but then you have to start questioning about who's making these decisions. Is this going to hinder him in the long run? So Marcus Rashford hits 20 plus goals for the first time. And then people will start saying, okay, well, can he continue to do this? The season after, he arguably does even better. He scores one less goal, but even though he gets one less goal and makes more assists, I think the key thing is he scores 21 goals that season, gets 13 assists. And seeing that creativity to him was very nice to see in that forward line that kept changing, because, Anthony Martial was out of sorts. Mason Greenwood was out of sorts at the time. He'd started that season. I think it took him a few months to score his first goal. And Marcus Rashford again was the only constant in that forward line. And the thing is, none of the goals he scored that season, 19 of them came before March. And that's when you could see he was struggling with that shoulder injury that at the end of the season he should have gone for surgery, but went to the Euros with England. The only notable thing he did was miss a penalty and then waited until afterwards to do the shoulder surgery. But I think 19 goals before March is quite an insane number. And obviously scores 2 months for the rest of the season. But there was a lot of poor performances in that stretch to the end of the season. And that there's a whole other video that can be done on why maybe it was wrong he was picked for the Europa League final, etc. But he goes away for the summer. He goes away for surgery after the Euros. Doesn't come back till October. And this was the season where obviously Solskjaer was in charge, and then he got sacked, and then Ralf Rangnick comes in. And it was a really poor season on a lot of fronts, not just for Rashford, but a lot of the players. But I think Marcus Rashford, got criticised arguably the most. Ralf Rangnick comes in, and it's clear that there is an issue, the fact that Marcus Rashford doesn't press very well. Hence why Anthony Elanga, I think, was picked ahead of him a lot of times. So Rashford ends that season with 5 goals, 2 assists. Not a good season by his standards. As a fully fledged professional in the first team who's raised his own expectation over the years. But it was clearly an out of sorts United, and it was an out of sorts Rashford. I remember, I think it was against Villa in January 2022, when he made almost no attempt to go for a loose ball in the box, and a lot of fans saw their arse with him about it. And I remember fans questioning his commitment towards the end of that season, where does he want to play for United anymore? Can he be asked? Because of body language, which seems like we're getting a bit of deja vu here talking about body language. And then Erik ten Hag comes in, and Rashford has arguably an all-timer, and I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for that 30 goal a season, because to get 30 goals and 9 assists, it's ridiculous as a left winger, or as a left forward, shall I say. Ten Hag operated him as a striker some games, as a left winger some games. Tactically he moved him around a little bit. But those were world-class numbers, especially in the as a Premier League footballer, where people say Premier League, best league in the world, so difficult to do it in. There are players who come over with that kind of record beforehand and just can't seem to do it. Strikers. Lukaku came back to Chelsea after Inter and got 15 goals, but didn't look like he was doing the business. And I think that's, considering that season started with a proposed bid from PSG, and you had many fans say, take the money. He's hit his peak, he's not going to do it. And then for him to produce that was incredible. Then he gets a new contract off the back of that, and then last season never gets going. He never gets going. Ends the season with 8 goals and 5 assists, which for a player of his caliber, it's not good enough. Now, last year was an even worse United. 23-24 was a very out of sorts United, where there were a lot of terrible performances, and it seemed like we had even worse players last season than we did previously. Obviously, he ends the season with an FA Cup, and we see that image of him crying at Wembley. Very emotional day for him. I believe he himself thought that might have been his last game for United. There were talks in the summer about whether he was going to stay, whether he was going to go. Eventually, the talks came that he was going to stay. And then we come to this season. We come to this season where currently, as things stand, he's on 7 goals and 3 assists. So he's almost matched last season's record, which is a bit of a low bar, but we're in December and it's been a bit of a roller coaster United season. Um, Eric Ten Hag comes in, seem to be doing a little bit better. The performances are kind of there, but they're not what people are expecting. In terms of contributions, I think that's the big thing about Marcus Rashford is people look at the goals and assist numbers and think, oh, he's not doing the business. And obviously Ruben Amorim comes in, and Rashford's looked a little bit better of late, but when no one is sitting here saying he's an absolute world beater, and obviously he gets dropped for the derby, which shocked everyone, and United go on and win the game, and Amorim looks almost vindicated about it, and then reports come out that Marcus Rashford is up for sale. So I think you got to look. Why is he up for sale? Well, why is he up for sale? You got to look at all the narratives and what's going on. So there are some narratives that there is some truth to. Under Ten Hag, it was seen that he didn't press that well, but I believe it was something tactical that Ten Hag did himself, where he said to Rashford, "Don't press as much as the others." In a way, when you gain as much credibility as Rashford did in 22-23, and in fact, even then, it might have been the same thing as well. Actually, you get some leeway, and Ten Hag will have obviously seen what Rashford was capable of. I thought, right, I'm going to give you leeway because I know that, when we get the ball back, you're up there ready and raring to go, and he did that. 30 goals is not small numbers, but I think the biggest issue from a football sense for Marcus Rashford is off the ball, or rather away from the numbers, because there's games where I think the best players can get goals without doing much in the game. We've seen that over time, of course, but I think in recent years there seems to be this notion that Marcus Rashford doesn't play well, or away from the goals and assists, there are games where he doesn't play well. He doesn't do a lot of things. And I actually kind of agree with that to an extent, because when you look at when he first broke through to compare to now, a lot of football he's played has been, either off the back foot or off the opponent's shoulder, or he exploits weaknesses and uses his pace to his advantage, which is football management 101. You're not going to have a player in there and ask him to do stuff he can't do, and you're going to play to his strengths if you want to get the best out of him. But if I look at the two players, physically there's been a lot of development. You can't lie, he's a lot bigger, he's a lot fitter now, but apart from maybe his finishing, there isn't a lot better than there was back then. Or at least for a player to go from what it was at 18 to now, you'd have expected a bit more development, which is the only reason why I won't say Marcus Rashford is world class. Which I know sounds ridiculous, but especially when you look at what he's been producing, he's produced world class numbers, he's produced very good seasons, very good performances. But in terms of raw ability and development and what's been developed over the years, I feel like he's been held back a little bit by all the uncertainty and the instability at United. If when he was 18, he had a proper coach that properly developed him into one of the best forwards in the world, which you could argue he is anyway. But then you could argue that maybe we could have seen more. And then you look at what he's like off the ball sometimes, and then it causes all sorts of questions. It's a very grey area topic, because you could make the same case about Raheem Sterling to an extent, and Raheem Sterling had Pep Guardiola as his coach for for a long time, and you saw what Sterling was producing. And I feel like if Rashford was in that Pep Guardiola team instead of Sterling, I do believe you would have seen a better, more developed Marcus Rashford. But we're here now, and this is how it is in reality. And in the last year or so, there seems to be a bit of a decline as well. Rashford doesn't seem to have that same burst of acceleration, that explosiveness that he used to have. And I think when you spend a lot of your career playing off that and it giving you a head start, it's almost because he's lost that. He's almost in some games looking at like a very limited footballer, which he isn't. But there seems to be something he's lost, not just with the pace, but with the mobility as well. And I just think that for him, he needs to develop his game a little more now. If I'm talking from what he needs to do moving forward, regardless whether it's at United or in Saudi or at another football club, because I do believe he needs to now work on himself a lot more. He needs to find other things to depend on aside from just his pace. Um, that's not to say he's a terrible dribbler of the ball. He's when he was a lot more agile a few years ago, he was a lot better with the ball than he seems to be now. I think obviously he's gotten bigger, and he sometimes it's like looking at him. It seems like he's getting in his own way a little bit, and it's a shame because there was a very good dribbler of the ball there. And then you come down to other narratives like he's only been good for one season. He's only had one good season in 9. Well, based on the statistics I've said to you earlier, that's not one good season in 9. That's 2 bad seasons in 9, where whatever the expectation of him was, he matched and exceeded. So you cannot sit there and say one 30-goal season is better than all of his other seasons. Well, as a young player in the squad, 11, 13, 13 under Jose, and then 22, 21. Those are very good numbers. And for a player who was playing off the left-hand side for a lot of time as well, to play on the left-hand side for a lot of time and to have that kind of goal return is actually it's actually pretty good. I think if you put him in, I think he gets 30 goals more often if he's in another league potentially in those 20 plus seasons. And then you come down to all the abuse he gets. And I will say abuse because I've been very fair on Marcus Rashford. I've been critical of him, but in a way where my opinion has never been, oh, he's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. I've seen people slag him off after the Liverpool game earlier this season when he wasn't the worst player on the pitch. I've seen people not mention anything about, like, Garnacho had a arguably worse performance that game, but I've not seen many people criticize Garnacho for that performance. I saw Rashford, for example, try and create stuff, and people blamed Rashford because Xerxes couldn't finish, for example, like missed 2 good chances. So I've always been very fair where if he's not been good, I'll say he's not been good. And I've said since the start of the season that this is a big season for him because in football terms, for Man United, whatever you want to call him a franchise player, you want to call him an MVP, whatever you want to call him, whatever you want to refer to him as, he is that. He is that. And, that should never be taken away from him at United. But I've always said that the board won't let anyone go this season. There'll be no prisoners. And it seems to be the case. If players aren't performing, if players aren't doing the business off the pitch, on the pitch, whatever, then whoever comes in, the board, new manager, etc., they will look at that and they will go, right, you're not doing the business. We might have to move you on. Because if you want to be a successful institution, you can't have any passengers, sadly. And so Jim Ratcliffe has made that very clear. And I think Omar Barada has got the same vision. Ratcliffe has said himself that, he basically wants everyone to be on board, everyone to be on the same wavelength, which is arguably why Dan Ashworth left. I believe the reports actually support that, with whether it's managerial choices, whether it's his own performance himself. So I think, yeah, if the board, if the manager don't feel Rashford is doing the business, then I think in the long run, maybe they're right. Not just for themselves, but for the player as well, because the player doesn't look happy. The player hasn't looked happy for a couple of years now almost. And people will talk about, oh, he goes out on the piss all the time. Okay, fair enough. But it won't be until he comes out and cries, maybe mental health, for instance, that people will say, so that was all a cry for help all along. We should have seen that. But why are we criticizing this? Listen, Marcus Rashford is human like all of us. We all like a night out. Do you know what I mean? Of course, you can question the decision, like going out in Belfast, going out in, the early hours of the morning after a derby last year. You can criticize all these things. I don't understand the criticism he got for New York because, on the one hand, it's I've seen people question about the way he dresses, the way he acts, etc. I could not give a toss personally. We all dress in different ways. You do you. Everyone's got their own style, whatever. And that was a player holiday. I believe Marcus Rashford wasn't the only one in America at the time. And I just don't understand some of the criticism he gets because it seems that some of the criticism he gets isn't football related. It's either finding a scapegoat or just finding a reason to blame something for going wrong. Like the Spurs game earlier in the season, Spurs' first goal, the amount of people I saw blaming Marcus Rashford and not giving a genuine reason why was ridiculous. Yes, it's Marcus Rashford's fault. Totally, it's Marcus Rashford's fault that Mickey van der Ven got the ball from a loose pass and ran the entire length of the pitch through the midfield, through the defence, and Tottenham scored. I don't see how you can defend a forward, a left winger, for someone else's poor pass to then cut through the midfield and cut through the defence as easily as Van der Ven did. I've had many conversations with United fans who will tell me why Marcus Rashford's been poor under Ten Hag. Or they'll say that rather and not tell me why, apart from simply he's crap, he's terrible, he's this, he's that. And I just think it's all come to a head now, not just for the football club, for Marcus Rashford himself. I mean, we all saw that interview he had with Henry Winter. And I'm not surprised Marcus Rashford's come out and said, I'm ready for a new challenge, I'm ready for this. Talk about the fans, because quite frankly, I hope Marcus Rashford I hope he sees that not all United fans hate him. I hope he doesn't believe that because there are a lot of United fans like myself who love him for what he is, love him for what he's done. But from a footballing sense, it's going to come to a conversation about, thank you for what you've done for us, but what are you going to do for us? I said this about the manager, Ten Hag, last season. I'll say this about anyone. And the board will be on board with that. And if Amrim is sitting there saying, he doesn't fit the system, if the board are saying, well, we don't like what he's doing on the pitch, he doesn't seem to be working hard, then I think overall it might be the right decision for everyone. Go away, Marcus. Go have a fresh start somewhere else. Go show to us what you're about. At PSG or Bayern Munich, I don't think Saudi's an option. I know financially they are, but I just don't. I think Marcus Rashford will have his own England ambitions, for instance, and his own ambitions to compete at the highest level. And I just don't see him cutting that off at 27, 28. I mean, there's reports that maybe PSG aren't looking at him right now. I think if Bayern Munich were monitoring his situation, I think that would be an excellent move for him. But I don't know what Vincent Kompany will be like with Marcus Rashford. I think he would fit the team. I think he would give that team balance. A forward three of Rashford, Kane, and Elise, I think would be exceptional. But it's whether the Bayern board feel that way. Any other club, maybe a club in Spain, maybe a club in France, Italy, who knows? I think I just think the bottom line is I think for Rashford's sake, I think it's best if he goes. Um, that's not coming from a he's not good enough, he can't be asked. I won't question his commitment to United. I won't talk about his off the pitch antics. I'm talking from a footballing perspective. And I think that if I was him, I would look to move on because he could stay here another 5 years and he could inconsistently do well, like people seem to think he does. He's been doing for the last couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, because apparently he's only had one good season according to people. And then he'll come to the end of his career and he'll say, "I should have gone. I should have left when it was coming to a head. I should have left when it was getting toxic," because it's just not doing wonders for him. I think people around him are as part to play in the issues as well. I don't think he's got good people. I know he's got family around him, but I think they're too involved. And I feel like he'd be better off as well with someone in that background around him who can give him a bit more of a straight talking, someone who will see it as it is without the emotion, without the heart. Because obviously when it's family, they're obviously gonna have their own opinions because obviously they're related to you, and it's a lot easier speaking from outside of that. And I feel like he would need better people around him in the future. Um, but I think overall, I would I would probably say it's best for him to move on. If he doesn't, I mean, when Amorim first came in, I thought there was a way that Rashford could fit into the system, not as a striker, but more in that left-sided 10, as they want to refer to it. Amorim has often used that role tactically as like a shadow striker, and I feel like Marcus Rashford could have played off of that very well. And he has looked a little bit better in that system, but I think, and I think, I mean, this can be a whole other thing on Amorim himself about how, you know, managers really show their mettle when they work with what they got rather than complain about what they haven't got, etc., etc. But I just think that overall, I think it's if he's not going to fit in, if I'm not even going to talk about this financially, about how it's academy player, pure profit. Yes, financially, with the wages off the books and everything would be good, but from a footballing sense, you would be losing a franchise player. You'd be losing a very good player, but he's not just turned into a bad footballer overnight. I just think a lot of things have happened in his personal life and in a footballing sense that it's just all coming to a head. And I just think overall, I think it's best for him to go. Where he goes, I don't know. So yeah, whatever happens with Marcus Rashford, good luck to him. I'll be supporting him no matter what as a United fan, because he is it's proper Roy of the Rovers a little bit, where at least for us fans, where it's a homegrown talent, someone from the local area who is a United fan, and it's almost like he resembles one of us a little bit. And seeing him do well, there is an emotional attachment there. And wherever he goes, I hope he does well. So thank you. There'll be more content coming out soon. There's a video coming out with Adam Matic, an exclusive interview. I'll be chatting to him about all things United and himself. But don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you later. Laters.